So, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are now ready to start the special technical session to continue our celebration of the International Day of Forests. I would like to invite FAO's Chief Scientist, Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, to kick off the session. Dr. Elouafi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tina. And I would like to do my speech in Arabic, and then we're going to switch to English. So with your, let me go. So, أصحاب السعادة صاحبة السمو الملكي الأميرة بسمة بنت علي، المدير العام للفاو للمنظمة، السادة الضيوف الأكارم، أيتها السيدات، أيها السادة. ما سمعناه اليوم من المناقشات والعروض لا يترك أمامنا مجالاً للشك حيال التحديات الهائلة التي تجابه غاباتنا خلال فترتنا الراهنة. وهذه التحديات الجمة تتراوح من تهديدات مرتبطة بالتغير المناخي، ويصل تأثيرها إلى ما يزيد على 200 مليون شخص ممن يواجهون تهديد الشح المائي والجفاف وتدهور البيئة الطبيعية، إلى تهديدات تعزى إلى النمو السكاني السريع والذي بدوره يزيد من الطلب على الغذاء، متسبباً بضغط على الأراضي والغابات التي تحيط بها مخاطر الاستثمار الجائر والإزالة لصالح الزراعة. دعونا لا نغفل التحديات المهددة للحياة، هذه التحديات التي تؤثر في كل فرد منا خلال خوضنا غمار الرحلة مع هذه الجائحة التي تفشت في أرجاء العالم. وفي الوقت نفسه يتعين على الكثيرين مواصلة الكفاح في ظل موجات الجفاف المتكررة بوتيرة متزايدة والفيضانات وانتشار أسراب الجراد، ناهيك عن النزاعات التي تشهدها المناطق الجافة. لعل القيمة الهائلة للموارد الغابات العالمية لا تخفى على أحد، فقرابة ثلثها نجده في مناطق نعيش فيه وفيه ندرة بالمياه تزداد يوماً تلو الآخر، وهي أيضاً موطن وبيت لنحو 3 مليار شخص. اسمحوا لي بذكر بعضها. نصف كمية الأغذية المنتجة حول العالم تنتج بالأراضي الجافة، وأيضاً في هذه الأراضي الجافة تسهم الغابات بدور رئيسي من خلال توفيرها لطيف واسع من الموارد، بدءاً من الوقود ومواد البناء والانتهاء بالفاكهة والمكسرات والأدوية والألياف. فجميع هذه السلع تمثل مصدراً للدخل بالنسبة إلى مئات الملايين من الأشخاص داخل المجتمعات المعتمدة على الغابات، ناهيك عن كونها شبكة أمان إبان فترات القحط وغيرها من الظروف الصعبة. أضف إلى ذلك أن التربة والغابات السليمة في الأراضي الجافة هي بمثابة مستودع لا يستهان به للكربون، أما إدارتها المستدامة فتوفر إمكانية هائلة للحفاظ على قدرة تلك الغابات على حجز الكربون، ما يخفف بالتالي من التأثيرات الخطيرة المرتبطة بالتغير المناخي الذي نشهده في الوقت الراهن. لحماية هذا الكنز نحن في أمس الحاجة إلى العمل التحويلي التشاركي collective action that Your Highness mentioned in the chat. اسمحوا لي أن أفسر أكثر في هذا اليوم الدولي للغابات. شهدت العقود الثلاثة الأخيرة تحولات طال انتظارها من خلال التركيز المتزايد على رأس المال البشري والاجتماعي، فضلاً عن الاستجابة إلى كل سياق على حدة من سياقات الأراضي الجافة، وذلك على التوازي مع الأخذ بعين الاعتبار كلاً من الأطراف الفاعلة والمؤسسات والمعرفة والاحتياجات على المستوى المحلي. إن القيام بتدخلات ترمي إلى زيادة الإنتاج الزراعي دون التسبب في تدهور الأراضي على المدى الطويل أو إيجاد فرص أمام تحقيق تنمية اقتصادية ذات قدرة على التأقلم مع المناخ، غير ممكن بمعزل عن إحداث التغييرات جذرية على إحداث تغييرات جذرية على المستوى الشمولي والتشاركي. وهذا يعني المشاركة في إحداث التغيير مع المزارعين المحليين والقطاع الخاص ومراكز البحوث والمؤسسات الوطنية في ساحة مجتمعية مرتبطة معاً بالمساءلة والإنصاف والشفافية وسيادة القانون. وهذا يعني أيضاً أنه سيلزمنا حشد موارد مالية هائلة، لأن نهج العمل كالمعتاد business as usual لم يعد خياراً إن أردنا مستقبلاً مفعماً بالأمن الغذائي للجميع. في ضوء عقد الأمم المتحدة لاستعادة النظام الإيكولوجي لفترة 2021-2030 المزعم إطلاقه في يونيو القادم تبقى الحاجة إلى استراتيجيات اقتصادية واستثمارية مماثلة مطلوبة من المستويات فوق الوطنية إلى المستويات المحلية لوضع آليات تمويل مخصصة لاستعادة الغابات والبيئات الطبيعية. أيضاً شدد القادة الدوليون من خلال تحدي بون على أهمية استعادة البيئات الطبيعية للغابات، وذلك بالتعهد باستعادة الغابات على امتداد 350 مليون هكتار من الأراضي عن طريق تطبيق نهج البيئة الطبيعية المتكاملة. أما نطاق هذا النهج ومستوى الطلب عليه لتحسين مصادر المعيشة فيبقى نطاقاً كبيراً شأنه في ذلك شأن المتطلبات المالية. فهناك حاجة إلى تخصيص مبلغ يصل إلى 49 مليار دولار سنوياً من مصادر عامة وخاصة على حد السواء، مع دعوة إلى التعاون بين الأطراف وتقاسم التكاليف المرتبطة بإعداد نماذج جديدة من الترتيبات المالية. ولتوفير هذا النوع من الدعم المخصص لممارسي استعادة الغابات والمروجين للمشروع، تقوم آلية استعادة الغابات والبيئات الطبيعية منذ عام 2015 بتطوير أدوات ومنتجات مختلفة، منها على سبيل المثال منصات التعليم الإلكتروني ودالات الذكاء المالي، كما تضع المبادئ التوجيهية وتصدر مطبوعات مختلفة حول التمويل المستدام. لا شك أن تكلفة عدم اتخاذ أي إجراء حيال استعادة الأراضي تزيد ب3 أضعاف عن تكلفة الاستمرار في مبادرات الاستعادة داخل آسيا وأفريقيا، الأمر الذي يجعل من الاستعادة استثماراً سديداً، بما في ذلك الاستثمار في استعادة غابات الأراضي الجافة. وهذا خبر جيد جداً من صديقتي ماريا إلينا أن المشروع للأردن والكونغو إن شاء الله يكون مقبول من GCF. فختاماً أتمنى لحضراتكم مناقشات بناءة وملهمة خلال الجلسات التقنية اليوم، وشكراً جزيلاً لإصغائكم. I'm going to switch to English just to introduce the next speaker, if I may, Tina. So it's really my pleasure to welcome Mr. Hugo Fernandez, Secretary of State for the Environment, Ministry of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge, Spain, to provide his opening remark. I think we have the video from Mr. Hugo.
Muy buena jornada a todos en este Día Internacional de los Bosques. Nuestro planeta se enfrenta hoy a dos grandes retos, cuyo alcance va mucho más allá de lo que durante muchos años se ha entendido como problemas ambientales. El cambio climático y la pérdida de biodiversidad, en la cual los científicos constatan lo que la naturaleza expresa cada vez con más claridad, en forma de episodios meteorológicos inusuales y extremos, de sequías acentuadas, de subida del nivel del mar, de acelerada extinción de especies. Esta realidad es especialmente grave en las zonas áridas, donde el calentamiento del clima no solo es, a día de hoy, el doble de la media mundial, sino que las crisis agravadas van en aumento en estas regiones, como demuestran los impactos actuales de la pandemia de la COVID-19. Las sequías, las inundaciones, las enfermedades y plagas, los conflictos y otros factores ya están devastando los medios de vida en estas zonas. Y para hacer frente a estos problemas es urgente un cambio en la gestión de las tierras secas, de sus bosques y sus sistemas agrosilvopastorales asociados, con el fin de asegurar que sigan proporcionando bienes y servicios críticos a quienes las habitan, protegiendo y restaurando la biodiversidad, mejorando así la fertilidad y la estructura del suelo y aumentando el almacenamiento de carbono en los suelos y la biomasa. Para lograr esa transición ecológica y portando valores económicos y valores sociales, es necesario contar con los actores locales, sin distinción de género. Deben desempeñar un papel crucial en este proceso. En España conocemos muy bien la situación, porque 2/3 partes de nuestros terrenos forestales pueden ser considerados bosques secos y sistemas silvopastorales, donde se compatibilizan un uso ganadero con diferentes aprovechamientos forestales. Por eso, al igual que todos los gobiernos, estamos adoptando y aportando una visión común de la alimentación, la agricultura, la ganadería y la silvicultura sostenibles, avanzando de la mano de los esfuerzos mundiales, como el Decenio de las Naciones Unidas para la Restauración de los Ecosistemas, para prevenir, detener y revertir la degradación de los ecosistemas en todo el mundo. Los bosques son el mayor sumidero de carbono gestionable, lo que los convierte en una herramienta imprescindible para alcanzar los ambiciosos compromisos que España y Europa han adquirido en la lucha contra el cambio climático. Por ello, son esenciales para el cumplimiento del objetivo de neutralidad climática a mitad del siglo establecido en los Acuerdos de París. Así, fomentar las absorciones de las tierras forestales es la mejor solución, basada en la naturaleza, para compensar las emisiones imposibles de eliminar. Para cuantificar cuál es la contribución de todo tipo de bosques a la lucha contra el cambio climático, es fundamental contar con información fiable, de calidad y continua en el tiempo, como los inventarios forestales nacionales. Nuestro inventario, el inventario español en concreto, lleva ya más de 50 años recopilando datos. En España, las absorciones asociadas al sector uso del suelo, cambios de uso de suelo y silvicultura suponen el 11,4% de las emisiones brutas producidas, de las cuales el 87% corresponde a tierras forestales. Si sumamos las absorciones debidas a los productos de la madera, la cifra alcanza el 94% de las absorciones netas. Las absorciones forestales se deben fundamentalmente a las actividades de forestación y gestión de los bosques y se estiman teniendo en cuenta el crecimiento en biomasa aérea y subterránea, materia orgánica muerta y a carbono orgánico en suelos. Las absorciones debidas a la gestión forestal sostenible suponen más del 85% de las absorciones estimadas para las actividades forestales. Por ello, España apuesta decididamente por esa gestión, una gestión planificada de los bosques que no solo son sumideros de carbono, sino que son claves para garantizar la calidad del agua y la regulación natural de su ciclo, contribuyendo a la salvaguarda de los ecosistemas fluviales y evitando costosas inversiones en obras e infraestructuras para garantizar el nivel de abastecimiento de agua. Los bosques son, además, reservas de biodiversidad, fuentes de salud y motores del desarrollo rural. De hecho, la España rural, al igual que en muchos otros países, se vertebra, entre otros elementos, sobre un tejido forestal, bosques y sistemas agrosilvopastorales, que aportan actividad económica y empleo, valor añadido y cultura. Por tanto, apostar por el territorio forestal es hacerlo por un tejido social valioso, por la garantía de su conservación y la posibilidad de seguir aportando a las generaciones venideras sus valores asociados, incluyendo ganadería, agricultura y patrimonio cultural milenario. En suma, los bosques, y más aún los bosques secos, son nuestros aliados para alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y, por tanto, resulta imperativo actuar ante la amenaza y las consecuencias del cambio climático, especialmente en zonas mediterráneas, en las que el gradual aumento de la temperatura, los cambios en el régimen de precipitaciones y la expansión de especies alóctonas están comprometiendo la salud e incluso la pervivencia de las masas forestales. Es, por tanto, más que necesario fomentar la adaptación de nuestros bosques al cambio climático, así como la lucha contra las cada vez más numerosas plagas y enfermedades emergentes que suponen un peligro cada vez mayor. En este sentido, al igual que en la amenaza que está suponiendo la pandemia de la COVID-19 para la humanidad, la inversión en investigación es clave. Será crucial el papel de la gestión forestal adaptativa apoyándose en los elevados niveles de variabilidad genética que tienen la mayoría de nuestras formaciones forestales. Debemos poner el foco también en aquellos ecosistemas que ya han sido degradados hasta la desertificación. Debemos revertir estos procesos de degradación y recuperar el terreno perdido. Necesitamos mejorar los sistemas de aprovechamiento sostenible de los productos agrícolas, ganaderos y forestales, seleccionando ejemplares adaptados a las condiciones ambientales, así como los requerimientos cambiantes del mercado para mantener la rentabilidad económica de los sistemas agrosilvopastorales. En conclusión, hace falta una transformación y aunque podría pensarse que para lograrlo hay que partir de cero y volver a empezar, lo cierto es que en todas las regiones hay un importante legado de lecciones aprendidas, de tradiciones y prácticas valiosas que deben ser apreciadas y continuadas. Todo este aprendizaje adquirido en el marco de un desafío que es global y común debe servir para apuntalar esa transformación a través de la cooperación y las alianzas entre las comunidades, las administraciones, el sector privado, las ONGs, el mundo científico, es decir, todos conscientes tanto de las oportunidades que la acompañan como de los riesgos que se derivan de la inacción. Y porque cada paisaje de las tierras áridas es diferente y, por tanto, no hay soluciones únicas para todos, cuando se planifican nuevas intervenciones o se dirigen las existentes en consonancia con el enfoque, es fundamental que haya transparencia y participación para acordar los incentivos, los desincentivos y el debate sobre los riesgos asociados. Concluyo ya, no sin antes agradecer a todo el equipo humano de la FAO y de cada uno de los estados involucrados en el grupo de trabajo de bosques secos y sistemas agrosilvopastorales el trabajo realizado y la colaboración de su informe final con el sugerente título de Creación de bosques y sistemas agrosilvopastorales resilientes en las tierras áridas, un enfoque para lograr transformaciones económicas, sociales y económicamente sostenibles. Sin duda, va a ser una magnífica herramienta para la recuperación de unos ecosistemas tan ricos en biodiversidad y cultura como son los bosques en zonas áridas. Cedo ahora la palabra a la señora Fida Haddad, que presentará el enfoque transformador basado en los amplios conocimientos y lecciones aprendidas en este grupo de trabajo. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Hogo, for your valuable opening remark. We acknowledge the Spanish government's continuous support. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the first technical session on fostering the transition to plume the dryland forest and agrosilvopastoral systems. You may not expect it, but there is much more to protect in drylands that have 27% of the world's forest and woodlands, supplying about 60% of the world's food production and supporting more than half of the world's livestock. However, climate warming in dryland is currently twice the global warming. According to the IPCC Climate and Land Report, in drylands, climate and desertification are projected to cause the reduction in crop and livestock productivity, modify the plant species mix, and reduce biodiversity. And with 1.5 scenario, 178 million people in dryland areas are projected to be more vulnerable by 2050. Therefore, business as usual approach is no longer an option. And this is what inspired dryland experts to join their efforts and expertise to answer the key question: what needs to change to ensure the sustainable production of dryland forest and agrosilvopastoral systems in a changing climate? And because each dryland landscape is different, there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. Extensive consultation with members of FAO Committee on Forestry, Working Group on Dryland Forest and Agrosilvopastoral System, and other national and sectorial experts began in 2019 to provide a simple approach for the context-dependent in dryland. The experts mapped the best practices and lessons learned with in-depth analysis on different action at policy, governance, and practice levels. The proposed approach focuses on the sustainability pillars. Under each of the three interconnected social, economic, and environmental sustainability pillars, there are three expected transformations. In total, we proposed 9 interconnected expected transformations. Given the current and future challenges under the economic pillar, The transition towards sustainable production system in dry land requires investment and an enabling policy for the management of different environmental and economic risk factors of different value chains and for the adoption of the most appropriate practices and technological innovation. At the same time, the private sector investment and private partnership are crucial to increase financial opportunity for sustainable production. However, without adequate and inclusive access to climate risk insurance systems, communities and producers will not be able to recover from climate disasters. Under the social pillar, the expected transformation focuses on human and social capital. The evidence found that where communities are part of the broader development discourse, positive impacts have been widely noted, with associated benefits on food and health. Therefore, equity, social protection, participation, and empowerment are the key transformational changes to reduce vulnerability to climate shocks. The critical pillar is the environmental pillar, as even if global warming can be limited to 1.5-degree increase, its impact will nevertheless test dryland ecosystems and aggravate land degradation. Therefore, an urgent need to balance land management interventions in dry land that ensure sustainable production, support local livelihood, and safeguard that natural resources, including water resources. The three critical environmental transformations are on the efficient use of dry land nature resources, strengthen the restoration efforts, and ecosystem conservation and protection. These expected transformation, when combined, can reinforce connection between the economic, social, and environmental pillars of sustainability and can take place through effective actions at various scale by different stakeholders. Potential benefits, trade-off, and co-benefits should be assessed, weighted up, and managed accordingly, while taking into account the traditional knowledge and gender equity. Nevertheless, the precipitation of benefits and trade-off may be different for different stakeholders. And this approach also goes hand in hand with FAO Common Vision for Sustainable Food and Agriculture and the 10 elements of agroecology that respond to the dryland context. It shows the complementarity and interlinkages to progress toward the SDG achievement. And because each dryland landscape is different, there are no one-size-fits-all solution. Key messages were recommended by the dryland expert to operationalize this approach. Interventions conducted in support of a specific expected transformation in one of the three sustainability pillars can directly or indirectly benefit the achievement of expected transformations in other pillars. And for the sake of the sustainability, single action can force synergies with other ongoing processes instead of creating the trade-off. And for example, sustainable forest and landscape management approaches can help stakeholders find these synergies to implement balanced solutions. In addition to the consideration of traditional local research-derived knowledge to make a greater contribution towards sustainability and reducing the risk of unintended trade-off. Also, the approach promotes cooperation and partnership between communities, government, private sector, NGOs, academia, and other actors, incentivized by a shared vision of the expected transformation. So when planning new or steering existing interventions in alignment with this approach, there is need for transparency, participation, and indeed negotiation to agree on incentives and disincentives and discuss the associated risk. Last but not least, champions are needed to advocate and promote the transformational change in the management of dryland agrosilvopastoral system. This publication is also available in other languages, so stay tuned. We produced also a policy brief that will be launched as well soon. To build back better, where possible, local trees and their management can play a major role in supporting livelihood and agriculture. Their interconnected economic, social, and environmental value should not be underestimated in maintaining, creating, and restoring dryland landscape. Happy International Day of Forests. And now I welcome Ms. Natasha, Deputy Director for Africa and Middle East, U.S. Forest Service, to moderate the discussion with our honorable panelists on how to foster the transition to bloom the dryland landscape. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fida, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Natasha Marwa. I'm the Deputy Director for the Middle East and Africa with the U.S. Forest Service International Programs. It's a privilege to welcome you all to this important event, and I'm humbled to be your moderator. Before we launch into the discussion, I wanted to remind the audience that you can use the Q&A function to send in your questions, and please also keep an eye on the chat. Colleagues will be sharing more information, materials, presenter bios, and details in the chat box. And finally, you can tweet about this event and many others on the International Day of Forests using the hashtag INTL Forest Day. Today is a celebration of the 2021 International Day of Forests, a wonderful occasion to gather and celebrate the world's forests and natural resources. It is also a fitting occasion to launch the FAO publication that we just heard about, Building Resilient Dryland Forests and Agrosilvopastoral Systems, and for hearing perspectives shared by our esteemed panelists. Dryland forests are in urgent need of conservation, attention, and repair. And this publication offers bold ideas and recommendations for transforming food production systems that rely on these ecosystems. Healthy and productive drylands are the building blocks for resilient livelihoods, economies, environment, and health. Maintaining productivity of dryland food production systems will ensure healthy communities and a healthy world under a changing climate. Over the past year, COVID-19 has taught us so much, including the need to be flexible and ready, especially when it comes to complex crises such as climate change. Cutting-edge science, policy, governance, and practical interventions at all scales can contribute to building resilience and adapting to climate change. Supporting economic, social, and environmental sustainability in drylands is required in order to promote the type of transformational change we will continue to dive into during this session. And now, without further delay, I am thrilled to have three high-level panelists with me who graciously accepted the invitation to join us today to offer their perspectives on building resilient dryland forests and agrosilvopastoral systems. You will hear shortly from Professor Jean Pascal, former Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and Professor of Climate and Environment from the University of Louvain. Ms. Lorena Aguilar, former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs in Costa Rica and the Regional Director for International Cooperation and Research at Flaxo. And Mr. Yi Anping, Director of South-South and Triangular Cooperation for FAO. We will have about 20 minutes or so for this discussion, so please join me in warmly welcoming our panelists. So we'll start with Professor Jean Pascal, who I think has some slides to share.
Yes, I hope you see them. Do you see them?
Yes, we can see them. Thank you so much. So we'll start off with you, Professor, and just the first question, why is transformation so critical in dryland ecosystems?
Well, Natasha, I will try to answer your question relying on two recent reports, the IPCC special reports related to land issues in the context of climate change on the one hand, and later I will also say a few words about some insights coming from the Global Sustainable Development Report 2019, which also made a few recommendations in the context of what we are celebrating today. the IPCC report I just mentioned was the full title is actually very long. It's a special report on climate change, desertification, land degradation, sustainable land management, food security, and greenhouse gas fluxes in terrestrial systems. And you can imagine it touches many issues that are very close to the subject of the day. So I will not, of course, provide a full presentation of this report here, but just highlighting in answering your question some key elements. The first key message is that the risk, and this has been evoked by by Minister Fernandez a minute ago, the risk from climate change increases with every fraction of a degree. And just looking at those three columns where you see the increasing risk, level of risk with the increasing temperature above the pre-industrial level, and those three columns are very much related to the subject of the day in terms of dryland, water scarcity, soil erosion, vegetation loss. And you see that as we go above 1.5 degrees C, above the pre-industrial, we are already hitting, particularly for water scarcity in drylands, some limits, some transition to a high level of risk. Another key message from that report is that the level of risk posed by climate change doesn't only depend on the global warming. Of course, it depends, as I've just shown, on the level of global warming, but it also depends on how we develop in the future, how population, consumption, production patterns, technological development, and land management patterns evolve. You see here for desertification, land degradation, food insecurity, for the same temperature increase, you see for two different scenarios, they are called in the jargon the shared socioeconomic pathway. You see that the level of risk and the manner in which the risk evolves is very different, and it's much lower overall for this scenario SSP1 than for SSP3. SSP1 is the one focused on sustainability. So it really shows that the future, including in drylands, is in our hands, because we can choose to go towards an SSP1 focus or stay on the opposite trend, which is called SSP3. There are many good news in this report, actually. One of them, for example, is that there are many co-benefits. I mean, this has been evoked as well in the talk by Madame Haddad a minute ago. If we integrate the action around climate change adaptation and mitigation with measures to fight desertification, manage better land and forest and food security, we can bring many co-benefits in many areas. Just one example given and explored at length in the special report from the IPCC is that dietary choices matter. You have the long version here. We're not going to read this, but you'll have those slides at your disposal after all, after the talk. But choosing a more plant-based diet can have good consequences in terms of impact on land. Another key message from the IPCC special report is that involving local stakeholders in every decision-making and governance is really important to maximize the impact of the measures that are taken. So I will stop here because the next two slides actually answer of your next question, Natasha.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing good news with us as well. So thank you for that overview and important perspective. This next question is for Vice Minister Aguilar. As former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, I'm keen to hear your perspective on land tenure and land ownership in dryland systems. How can governments and other decision-making bodies provide more land rights to local and indigenous communities and women?
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you, everyone. Greetings from Costa Rica, special to Her Royal Highness, Princess Basma, and congratulations to FIDA's team for the excellent report. Natasha, I mean, land tenure rights underpin land use change decisions, Natural Resource Management Authority. And we know insecure tenure rights are a contributor to deforestation and land degradation. And definitely clear and secure tenure rights can provide a basis for benefit sharing and negotiation with rights stakeholder governments and the private sector. However, in many countries, women tenure rights to land are either not recognized by law or custom, and if they are, they're usually secondary to men's rights. Women's rights to land are nuanced and highly context dependent, but recent analysis demonstrate a gap between international obligations and national law related to women's rights to land. Data, for example, from the OECD Development Center Social Institution and Gender Index, known as CIGI, found that women only have the same legal rights as men to own and access land in 28 countries in the world. So what can we do? I mean, for example, in Costa Rica, we're launching an award for productive units to disattach payment of environmental services to land, for example, because they cannot benefit because of that. And I have also been working with countries like Cameroon and Mexico to find solutions. In Cameroon, for example, a RED project was able to work with the chiefs, especially with the mothers and the wives of the chiefs, to convince them that women should have the right to own land.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lorena, and thank you for that last example. It seems really encouraging and inspiring and innovative in its approach as well. So thank you for that. My next question is for Director Anping. Can you share an example of the nexus between traditional knowledge, technology innovation, and the scientific community, where different pools of knowledge came together to support the sustainability of dryland forests or agrosilvopastoral systems?
谢谢主持人，我借这个机会，我先用中文表一个态，在此之后，我用英文来回答问题。首先，我对约旦公主殿下之一建议，他亲自来参加的活动。我非常高兴，也非常荣幸有机会参加今年的国际森林日的这个活动，纪念活动。刚才在高级别的会议上，我们获得了一些非常重要的信息，比如说，只有森林健康才能保证人的健康。每年全球森林减少的面积超过1000万多公顷。同时，森林用地的面积和粮食农业用地的面积的这个矛盾，现在越来越惊人。如何在保证粮食安全的前提下，来尽可能的减少森林的面积的减少，这是一个越来越复杂的问题。同时，许多代表也提到，恢复森林不仅仅是种树，是一个综合的体系，是一个综合的生态体系。恢复森林是需要大量的投资的，这个总干事反复提到。在本届会议开始的时候，我们的首席科学家也强调，每年需要490亿美元来支持森林的恢复，这是一个很大的数字。如何让更多的政府、私营部门、国际机构和其他的部门，包括学术来参与，这是一个非常重要的问题。所以说。还有一个重要信息呢，就是说我们需要全世界共同行动起来，联合起来才能够做到。所以说我作为来自联合国粮农组织南南与三方合作的我想提就是说，我们鼓励并希望可以通过南南合作和三方合作，为森林的恢复 为改善生态环境来做出更大的贡献。谢谢。下面我用英文来回答刚才主持人提出来的问题。Thank you very much for Madam Chair, just raise this critical and important issue question. I would like to take this opportunity to share an example from China, which is from Haohan County dryland farming system that has been declared, we call the Global Important Agriculture Heritage System by FAO. This county is located on the border of Hurricane Sandland, which is one of the most deserted area in China. As everyone knows that soil erosion now is getting very serious. But in this country, soil erosion also is a huge challenge. You know that in 1987, soil erosion in this country was about 94% of its total area. And among them, over 60% was above moderate level or serious level. Haohan County has long dry farming system history, about 8,000 years. This ancestor has been accumulated a lot of skill and experience over 1,000 years of practice and learning. Over the past 2 decades, this county has successfully applied this new technology to control soil erosion and degradation. The farming and the production system is very much in symbiosis with their ecosystem. The main species in this county, such as the sea buckthorn, yellow willow, Chinese pine, mulberry, and sand pine, they tolerate drought, sand, wind erosion, and provide ecological protection. Agriculture crops growth in this area also has very long, strong drought and heating resilience. For example, the millet can tolerate about 48 hours without opening up at a temperature 40 degrees centigrade, while barley can only tolerate 20 hours, but wheat only can only about 15 hours. These efforts have significantly improved environment and production condition in this country. This country is also considered a moderator for dynamic conservation and adaptive management of dryland ecosystem. In fact, it was declared just site Haohan was named Global Top 500 of ecological development by UN in the year of 2002. What made this system successful was that it brought together all elements in the ecosystem, including traditional knowledge, wisdom of local people, landscape, right policy, and technical support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yi. Thank you for providing that example of the nexus and coming together of those different pools of knowledge in this example of controlling erosion. Now I'll shift gears back to Mr. Jean-Pascal, and I'm wondering, how can we increase awareness about dryland ecosystems and their unique benefits that may lead to greater advocacy and conservation measures? There's often a misnomer that drylands are equated with barren land or lands that are not productive or useful. How do we change that perception and increase awareness?
Well, I think so. Thank you for the question. I think some of the elements to that question can be found in the IPCC report in terms, for example, of economic valuation, in terms of events like the one we have today in terms of education, but then a whole other range of elements can be found in this Global Sustainable Development Report published in 2019 at the request of the UN General Assembly. And it's focused on the on all the obstacles on the way of implementing Agenda 2030, which is a very broad agenda, of course. But I will try to give some highlights of that report, which could contribute to answering your question. The GSDR 2019 identified 6 key entry points, which I will show in a second, for successful transformation. And transformation is really at the core of that report. That's why I thought it would be useful to use it today, which is focused on transformation in the dryland ecosystems, and 4 levers. So 6 key entry points and 4 levers that are critical to maximize impact in different parts of the world. And the report insists on the fact that true transformation is possible only when the levers are deployed together in an integrated and international manner. You could say holistically, to use a word that is used very much these days, and that was used earlier today. So here are the 6 entry points: human well-beings and capabilities, sustainable economies, energy decarbonization and access, food and nutrition, urban and peri-urban development, and global commons. So certainly forests, drylands are linked to food and nutrition and to the global commons. At least those 2 entry points are very much related to the forest. And then the 4 levers are governance, economy and finance, behavior and collective action, science and technology. And if you read that report, and it's available on this website here, you'll have an idea of on how to maximize awareness about the tools that are available to solve the problems we have to solve and to implement the Agenda 2030. The slides I've just been showing will be available in a few minutes from now on the web page that's here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Jean-Pascal. And that previous slide is such a nice and clear way to lay out those different levers and the different inputs. So thank you so much for that and for sharing this material. Ms. Larina, over to you. As we heard from Mr. Jean-Pascal earlier, research shows that most dryland systems will become hotter and drier under climate change scenarios. Vulnerable groups, especially women, will continue to be disproportionately impacted by climate trajectories. How can partners working in countries that have significant dryland ecosystem resources meaningfully involve women and other marginalized groups in decision making?
Thank you, Natasha, for that question. And probably you're going to hear already some of our biodiversity. There's some parakeets around, so sorry for the background sound. Well, first of all, it is more than just involvement in decision making. There are a series of criteria that I like to call them like 8 golden rules to ensure that really women and marginalized people are taken into account. First of all, the people that are on the ground, the project teams, need to be inclusive and with a variety of representations, and they need to have the technical expertise to support gender responsive actions. And what do we mean by gender responsive actions? It's not only understanding that we're different, but really having an impact in closing those gaps that are important. We need to also understand the inclusion of the national gender policy and the international mandates that the countries have taken. We need, of course, that women and women organizations are represented in these stakeholder consultations. The 4th point probably one of the most important is to conduct a gender analysis, understand who uses what, when, what are the different knowledge, what are the different constraints that they have to fully engage and to fully benefit of the initiatives. And then we need to promote equal rights to access and derive benefits from the use, management, and conservation of dryland systems. Definitely, the one that you were asking is to support the full, equal, and effective engagement of women and men. This is not about counting warm bodies in a meeting. It's to really create the processes so that people can fully engage. And that has to do a lot with knowledge. If you don't explain, for example, what is IPCC, what is RED, what is landscape restoration, then people cannot fully engage. I mean, red is not a color. It's more than that. There is a need to that. Very important, we need to provide the adequate resources. We have all the financial mechanisms right now related to climate change with gender policy and gender plan of actions, but we need to ensure direct access to marginalized groups, especially for those resources. And then we need to ensure the result frameworks are gender responsive. We need to be able to measure. This is what Fida was saying, that we need to build back better, but how? How can we measure what that better means and for whom that better is? Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you, Ms. Lorena. And if I may just ask you a brief follow-up question, if you could offer one piece of advice to decision makers to adopt the 8 golden rules, what advice would you offer?
My advice is that they will be surprised how effective and efficient their initiatives are when everybody is involved in these processes. Leaving 3.365 billion solutions, where half of the world, women, is illogical when we're facing so many challenges in this world.
Thank you so much. And our last question for the afternoon is back to Mr. Yi. There's tremendous potential for stakeholders at all levels to exchange knowledge and practices about sustainable dryland ecosystem management. How can there be more open and transparent sharing of failures between policymakers, national government, the scientific community, practitioners, development partners, to help foster and facilitate lessons learned?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that this is a very good question, and also it's a very complex question. Let me try to my best to answer this question. When we talk about knowledge sharing and learning, we always we like to see the success story, good story. Even when we do talk about the lesson learned, there is discomfort for talking about the failure story. If we want to have a productive conversation of knowledge sharing and adaptive learning, we need to normalize the so-called failure story. The failure story and lessons learned to provide adaptive learning cases story that can bring stakeholders, including policymakers, farmers, scientific communities, and development partners, sit around the same table. We sit together. By doing so, it creates a platform for them to co-create solutions and innovations to address the weakness and failures. The failure story needs to address integrate improvement, innovation, and should not to be about point fingers. This is the best way to create the trust among all of the partners. Make this dialogue open, more transparent, more inclusive, and more productive. Coming back to your question, how this applies to exchange of knowledge about the dryland ecosystem management? First term of dryland could evoke an arid wasteland. This is far from the truth. Let me share a few insights from the first global assessment of the trees, forestry, and land use in dryland published by FAO in the year of 2019. First, world dryland contains 1.2 billion hectares of forest. This is 27% of world forestry area. Second, an estimated 2 billion people live in the dryland. Among them, 90% are in the developing countries or developing regions. Third, drylands are the home to 35% of the global biodiversity hotspots. Fourth, dryland supports half of the world livestock, a key source of the food security for 90% of the dryland population living in the developing country and developing area. Last, dryland is an integral part of food system and provide rich ecosystem service. So local people have a profound understanding of their dryland ecosystem. They interact daily with their environment and frequently use a wide range of adaptation messages as part of their livelihood. So local communities are hold and the guardians of the knowledge of drylands. One of the most quoted reasons for failure of the land and forestry management initiative is the mismatch between the goals of the local resource owner and the user and those of project initiated and implemented. This is the first gap we need to bridge: information and knowledge on the land and forestry management practice to understand what needs to be left untouched, what to be improved, and what to be changed. This is exactly what FAO South-South and Triangular Cooperation Division and the Forestry Division aim to do with making every voice count for adaptive management initiative. This initiative will cover countries in the region of Asia and Africa. By working with existing platform and network in the countries and communities to promote a learning by doing approach with participatory community video. The use of participatory video is not new, but its use as a tool for regular monitoring project progress and change in practice, behavior, success, failure is relatively new. This video will provide a visual baseline of current land and forestry management practice in the different landscape and countries. The aim is to use this video case study to bring together the communities, policymakers, scientific communities, and development partners to work together on identify solutions that will add value to the communities and the ecosystems. In this process, communities and countries will learn from each other through video-based knowledge sharing. Language barrier will be easily, quickly, and cost-effectively solved through the translation without losing visual content. Beyond knowledge sharing, both divisions, we hope to use this video to advocate for change in policy, change in practice, and change in behavior. The use of
Thank you
video.
so much. Thank you so much,
Last
Mr.
one.
Yi, for
Last
that.
sentence.
Yes, please go ahead.
The use of video as a monitoring, knowledge management, and South-South cooperation tool will revolutionize the way of measure and the community impact and change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yi. And I very much appreciated what you said about normalizing failures, sharing, and using that as a way to build trust. So with this wraps up and concludes our Q&A discussion with the panelists. Please join me in warmly thanking all of our panelists for their insightful comments, advice, and recommendations. And just to close out, as we heard earlier from our distinguished panelists and guests, there's tremendous opportunity for international cooperation to support conservation of dryland ecosystems. We have an obligation to support sustainable conservation of these areas. There are many opportunities for the international community to support local and national efforts. From the perspective of the U.S. Forest Service and our partners in the Middle East and Africa, we have seen tremendous potential in fostering partnerships across the region. We have also seen the power of regional networks of expertise in conserving drylands and restoring ecosystems. Ecosystems transcend borders and traditional boundaries. Working collaboratively across countries and across regions is critical for addressing climate change. We continue to see successes when international organizations convene diverse partners and perspectives from around the region. I'm excited about the initiative Mr. Yi mentioned towards the end of the panel discussion, making every voice count for adaptive management, working with these existing platforms and networks in countries and communities across continents to convene policymakers, scientists, development partners, and communities to learn from each other through innovative platforms. I emphasize all of this as an opportunity for international cooperation to continue to support sharing local knowledge and experiences, to build on local and regional expertise, and to promote communities of learning and collaboration to advance innovation. From our perspective, this collaborative work has led to extraordinary achievements and professional development. And these partnerships did not take place overnight. They required long-term collaboration, engagement, and investment. Thank you all again very much for your participation today. Happy International Day of Forests, and I will turn it over to the next session on sustainable financing for forest and landscape restoration and a short teaser video. Thank you again.